Hello and welcome to Murder Dictionary Podcast. I'm Brianna and that is Courtney.
Hello.
Before we get into the case that we're going to talk about for this episode, we always remind you of a few things that you can find in our description and show notes. You will always find links to our social media if you want to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Over there, we will update you on what new episodes are coming out, when we have Patreon episodes, memes, true crime facts. Courtney will post some breaking news and new crime shows that are coming out. So definitely follow us if you want that info. And we have links to our thread list where you can get merch. So if you want t-shirts, phone cases, tote bags, beach towels, stuff like that, you can get that on Threadless. And we have the link in our show notes for our Patreon. So it's patreon.com/Murder Dictionary Podcast if you want bonus episodes, ad-free episodes, and all that additional perks and stuff. We want to thank the people that are new on our Patreon this week.
Of course we do.
So we want to say thank you to Casey, Charlie, Amy, and Eek Ivy increased their pledge as well. So thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
And we always put links to the resources that we use for research. If you want to do more reading on any episode, you will find links so you can read articles and case law and stuff like that. We also put links to resources for things like 12-step and domestic violence resources, suicide hotlines, anti-bullying resources, Trevor Project, stuff like that. So if you need any of that support, we always put links for those. I think that's pretty much all I have. Anything from you, Court, before we get into the story?
Not really. I'm just looking forward to moving on to the letter P.
Yeah, we're starting a new letter. We are on letter P for going postal. I think everybody kind of knows what it means, but we're going to explore a few cases from this, would we say, genre or, different theme. Yeah.
I mean, the post office has definitely been in the news. They've, postal workers in general, I'm sure, having a non-anxiety filled time lately.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure their jobs are simple and so easily lately. So yeah, I just kind of, post office, postal workers. Sounds great.
Yes.
So much to cover.
Great idea that Courtney had. Totally perfect. Let's dive into a little bit of history about going postal, postal attacks, postal worker violence issues, and kind of get some background on that first.
Sounds good.
Going postal is an expression that originated in America, which refers to incidents where an employee who loses control of their anger becomes violent towards colleagues or in their workplace. The term actually came to public consciousness in the 1980s because between 1983 and 1993, there were 11 postal workers who went on murderous rampages only within the U.S. The first incident of a postal worker retaliation at work was on August 13th, 1970, when 41-year-old Alfred Kellum was sent home for drinking on the job.
He was getting drunk for my birthday.
Yeah, he was celebrating
Except I was
you.
-15, but what are you going to do?
It's still worth celebrating.
My mom was
he could
6.
Feel it.
Yeah, exactly. He knew something was coming.
Once he was sent home for drinking, he came back and he shot his 54-year-old supervisor, Harry Sendro, 3 times in the back before police found him 5 hours later, passed out. Between 1970 and 1997, over 40 people were killed by current or former employees in 20 different incidents of murder in the workplace.
So many people.
Between 1986 and 2011, workplace shootings happened roughly twice a year, with an average of 11.8 people being killed per year. The incident of postal worker retaliation in 1986 was really the actual huge one that made the expression going postal a very common term. So that was the one, like, even though there was, one in 1970 that was the very first, and then kind of a blank spot, there was a couple in between there. 1986 was the big one that caught just national attention, and then everybody started using that term, going postal.
Gotcha.
So on August 20th, 1986, in Edmond, Oklahoma, postman Patrick Sherrill was about to be fired when he decided to basically get revenge on his employer. So Patrick shot 20 of his coworkers at the post office and actually ended up killing 14 of them before committing suicide when the SWAT team arrived. The 1986 mass shooting garnered so much national attention that soon everyone knew what that term meant. It was pretty much overnight because of the media coverage that everybody knew going postal was the buzzword, It was the incident that actually inspired the murderer from the case that we're discussing on this episode today. So Joseph M. Harris was born in March of 1956 in the State Women's Prison in Clinton, New Jersey. Joseph was the second oldest of 10 children, but the kids were actually separated and sent to different places.
He was born in the prison, second of 10.
Yes, his mother had a lot of children, and she was in and out of prison apparently, and he was actually born inside the prison system.
Do we know what kind of charges the mother was brought in on usually?
That I have no idea. I was not able to find that information, and it was pretty hard to dig up a lot of info on this, actually, from his childhood, from, what's going on with his mother. There was a lot of just holes, in the info. There was just nothing out there. So I'm not exactly sure, but you just have to know how deeply that would affect a child.
Yes.
If you know she's going in and out of prison and you've got all these siblings, there's no way for you to have stability in your life,
Yeah.
You can guarantee that that kid is going to really have a lot of emotional trauma. So he only got to spend the first 2 months of his life with his mother before Joseph was taken from her custody and given to his aunt and uncle. Joseph had hardly any contact with his mom after he was taken away, and he didn't even meet his father until he was 11 years old.
I mean, it's kind of a good thing that he knows who his father is, right? I mean, I'm not even trying to talk shit, but if, you've got a lot of kids, it's going to be drugs or prostitution generally, So it's I'm impressed.
Yeah.
Right?
That's one word for it. Yeah, I mean, I feel bad. I mean, I don't know what the process was. Again, there's a lot of holes here. Was he looking for his father those whole 11 years and finally found him? Or did his father seek him out? We don't really know. But the fact that his mother wasn't there, he was raised by his aunt and uncle that were hopefully stable and hopefully provided him a loving home. But then he has no biological parents. And, you could have as great of a home as possible. But I think there's always, if you know that those aren't your biological parents, there's that curiosity and that longing and a little bit of abandonment. And these days, I think we have more awareness of that. So, we could put a kid in therapy so they could process those things. But we know Joseph wasn't getting that kind of mental health help, to process those feelings.
Very interesting. Yes.
So his relationship with his mother was very tumultuous since she was very unreliable because she was constantly in and out of chaotic relationships. like you said, I feel like there may be an angle or an argument to be made that there was involvement in at least drugs, because I did find information that her relationships were just absolutely terrible. She was just in and out, just with all sorts of guys that were not treating her well. And so it provided this kind of undertone of not really having a stable place to live, not really knowing what was going to happen next. So it was very hard for him to really be a part of her life when she was going through that.
Gotcha.
From an early age, Joseph actually believed that he was, quote, cursed because he was born in prison and abandoned by both of his parents. He really just kind of looked at himself as like the ultimate bad luck kid. Like everything that could go wrong will go wrong. Everything that could happen that's bad is going to happen to me. He became extremely introverted. He was timid, and he was really resentful of everyone around him that he felt had a lot more happiness or good fortune or good luck than him. There are many reports that he suffered from a lifetime of mental health challenges. However, the reality is we don't really know what he was diagnosed with and at what point in his life. You know, there's a good argument to be made that, of course, there's some trauma from the stuff that happened with his parents, but we don't really know anything about his diagnoses until maybe later on during trial when he was evaluated. But it seems that he was struggling with that his entire life and just didn't really have any diagnoses or treatment from what I could find. We do know that in his childhood, he had an imaginary friend. And he says that as a kid, he would hear voices of what he described as a Indian chief.
An all-seeing overseer. Interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. I'm not sure where this came from.
Did you have imaginary friends when you were a kid?
I did not. I know that I'd hear stories that my uncle did, and it was like very real to him. But
okay.
But I didn't. I really didn't. But I was an only child for a very long time. My brother's like 12 years younger than me. And so I was very much a solitary person, and I could kind of entertain myself. So I may not have had an imaginary friend, but I definitely did a lot of talking to myself and playing with myself and, solitary
Sounds like you were
activities.
your own imaginary friend.
Yeah, pretty much. I'm like, we
Got
could
it.
have fun. Me,
Okay.
myself, and I.
Because I'm like, everything you're saying says you should have had an imaginary friend, but you're just telling me that it was you.
Yeah, my imaginary friend was myself, you
Got
know?
it. Okay.
Did you have an imaginary friend?
Of course.
Really?
Yeah, and
What was its name?
There were two pet mice that I would keep, and their names were Timmy and Vanessa, just like in The Secret of Nim.
Oh.
Mice, right? And when they were bad, I would put them in the tank of my imaginary lizard to scare
Whoa.
them into being good.
That's intense.
Dissect that.
Yeah, that's a lot to break down.
All right, so
I don't have the proper credentials to unpack that shit.
No one does. So I'm always curious to hear about other people's imaginary friends because mine are so vivid. Like, I know what they were wearing. They looked like Bianca and what's his name from The Rescuers. Like, it was intense. It was intense.
And that's the thing is it's pretty normal for that to happen for a kid, but it just seems like in combination with everything else Joseph was going through, it's normal to an extent, but then also was this an early sign of something bigger going on? For most kids, it's just a normal thing, and they talk to that imaginary friend and they grow out of it, and that's it,
Yeah.
It really is not a big deal. But I think in conjunction with, other mental health problems and trauma and, just unstable household and stuff like that, it could have been a much bigger issue for him that maybe just wasn't looked into or treated.
Yeah. And we don't really know about if he was religious, so this could even, be almost misinterpreted, right? This is his God force that he,
Like a guide, yeah.
There it is. Yes, an Indian chief with a headdress guide.
He started to say later on, like, that he would hear this voice of what he called a ninja spirit. His explanation of it was that it was a brave warrior that helped guide him. So he didn't just have this imaginary friend when he was little. He actually got older and it stayed with him. And it well into adulthood through, up until even being incarcerated. He just had this ninja spirit that was helping to guide him. That was what he believed was real. It was so vivid that it was a real person in his life, basically. So Joseph was also fascinated with weapons, and he would frequently draw guns, swords, and guillotines all over his books, his belongings, and his papers. I don't know if you knew this type of person when you were little, but I definitely can envision that person for me.
Yeah, we all know this guy.
I'm just saying this to say all these things are not awful alone, but all together you start to get this picture of something that's worth kind of perking your ears up and paying more attention to, right?
Yes, I agree.
If you're just into like, oh, I like medieval weapons and I like to draw them and not a big deal. If you just have like an imaginary friend or, maybe mutter yourself a little bit like when you're at home alone, like, nah, it's not a problem. Nobody really is going to bat an eye. But some of these things together combined with trauma in the childhood and mental health issues and just stacked together is just creating this recipe for disaster if untreated.
Yes.
I think he just needed to talk to a therapist, maybe get on medication depending on what his diagnoses are, and figure it out, and things could have been fine. But instead, we're seeing the beginnings of heading towards a peak of something,
Yep.
His younger cousin says, quote, he was always fascinated with martial arts. He was always fascinated with explosives. He always liked guns, but he never hurt anyone. Of course, that is an important distinction. It's not like he was the type of person that was going around and harming animals and other children when he was young or anything like that. The typical, like, McDonald triad or whatever that we see in many serial killers, he doesn't fit into that category. This is a going Postal story, so he wasn't doing that stuff. He was just fascinated with violence and instruments of violence, it seems.
Okay.
Joseph would also practice martial arts, and he became quite athletic, growing to be 6'2" and 175 pounds.
So on top of all the things he's got going on, now he's a very imposing figure, whether he's threatening or not. It's just the fact that he's a 6'2" man, 175. When he's standing in front of you, he's kind of demanding attention just because he's so large. So then to have all these other quirks, right?
Yeah. Quirks like doing karate. If you see some guy that's, over 6 feet doing karate randomly, I'm going to take notice.
Yes.
I'm going to be like, what's going on here? Unless you're in a dojo, do it. And he was the type of person that did karate and did martial arts just in random places. So if you are over 6 feet doing that, you're not in a dojo like where karate happens. It's going to be a little like, again, I'm going to kind of perk my ears up like, okay, what's up with this guy?
Yeah, and it's the kind of thing that you remember and tell people about later.
Right.
There's this
I saw
huge
this
dude
giant man.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
We're telling each other the story right now. That's exactly it. Like, people remember, and then when you find out he's got the Indian spirit guide, the ninja spirit, the plot thickens.
It definitely. So after graduating from high school in 1974, Joseph says that the ninja spirit instructed him to join the U.S. Navy, specifically for the purpose of being stationed in Asia to fulfill his, quote, prophecy.
I like, honestly, this is going to sound nuts, but I really like that the Ninja Warrior is at least encouraging him to do things that will benefit him later in life. Right? He's not just like smoke meth and do crack all day and
Well,
steal from people.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
And murder
At first,
people.
I'm like, okay.
Or they're like, it's like, it's giving him an idea. Like, hey, maybe you should go to school. Hey, let's join the Navy. Like,
Yes.
he's coming up with things that are going to be beneficial later, which a lot of people that are having imaginary friends leading their lives don't come up with good ideas.
I mean, he was definitely guided. It was like his moral compass, this
Yes.
ninja spirit that he felt, in his words,
There we go.
That's what guided him to do the right thing. So Joseph ended up serving 2 years on an aircraft carrier in the Navy, specializing in repair of mechanical and electrical equipment. But he received a general discharge in 1977 for failure to attend to his duties. And that seems like a very just little general failure to attend to your duties. Like, the standards are very high in the Navy. Maybe there was something he missed. But if we find out later that he's kind of slacking off at work and that's just his MO, and he's literally just doing martial arts at work, we've got to assume that he was kind of doing his own thing, drawing weapons and doing martial arts even in the Navy,
Yeah.
I think that's what was going on. We don't know. There's no direct report of it, but I just assume, because we see it later on, that that's what was going on before. After he left the Navy, his contact with family, including his mom and siblings, became increasingly sporadic. When he got home from serving, he moved into a small second-floor apartment in this 6-bedroom house that was actually owned by his half-sister, Carmen Johnson. Joseph would end up living there for the next 14 years, and Carmen described him as, quote, very, very quiet.
It's an interesting way to describe him. Yeah. It's
Right.
Oh, wow, okay.
And their family. It's not like, okay, if you find someone off of Craigslist, maybe it's hard to get to know someone. Maybe you don't have anything in common. You're a little quiet. But this is family, someone who's known him his entire life. You should be talking to them, right? Checking in once in a while. So it is kind of notable that he feels so detached from people and doesn't really feel any sort of, let's say, obligation to even make small talk with his half-sister,
Yeah. For 14 years, he lived there.
Right.
That's a long time.
To just not talk.
Yeah.
Imagine having a silent roommate for over a decade. Just
I
walking
can't.
in, saying nothing, walking out and going to work, saying nothing. It's
What
creepy.
does that mean? Like, I don't know.
So after he was home from the Navy, he decided to enroll in the local community college. But he found it really difficult for him, and after one semester, he ended up dropping out. Since school wasn't for him, Joseph decided to search for a job that would be a good actual career. Not just a job, but something more long-term.
There's that Indian spirit. The ninja spirit, again, coming through, bringing us something that we can work with here.
Yes, that guide, that kind of like drifting towards good, really gravitating towards things that are beneficial, not just making like short-sighted decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. He's not like, I'm going to collect cans for the rest of my life. You know what I mean?
Right.
He's like, I'm going to make a career and I've got some training behind me. It's very different than most of these we see.
Have a great idea you'd like to unpack or a story you'd like to tell on a podcast? With Spreaker, you can record, host, and share your episodes with the world in seconds. And Spreaker is the only platform where you can start monetizing your podcast from day one. All you need to get started is a microphone or even a cell phone, and of course, a good idea. For 1 free month on a pro account, visit Spreaker.com/join today. That's SPREAKER/join today to sign up for free.
So in 1981, Joseph began working for the Postal Service in Ridgewood, New Jersey.
That's a band, right? Isn't it? Postal Service?
Yes, it is.
It is, right? Okay.
You're not tripping. You're not making that up.
I'm like, if we don't say it, somebody's going to comment and be like, they didn't even talk about the Postal Service. I hate this show. Like, you know. So, we said it, okay?
It exists. We know.
We got you.
You don't have to message us.
Thank you.
So over the course of the next 9 years, he would spend most of his time working in the overnight shifts as a mail sorter. His coworkers would try to basically politely describe him as things like tense, quiet, sullen, and ill-tempered. And they said that he often wore army fatigues, boots, and a beret. I don't even know if this is worth saying, but did you ever go to the Target on Ventura and DeSoto?
Yeah. Keep going.
Do you remember the cart guy that wore army fatigues, boots, and this like really precariously positioned hat? And he collected carts for like, gotta be like 15 years.
He acted like, I mean, he did his job like he worked there.
No, he worked there, but he did his job like it was the most important thing on the battleship, you know?
There it is.
Like this was a life and death situation.
Yeah.
That's the first thing I envisioned when I read the description of him at work. Like
I would have gone the rest of my life without thinking of that dude.
You remember him?
Yeah, like so vaguely, but like, did he work there? Did he not? But you're right. It was like the most important thing right now is this cart between me and you.
Right. Oh, yeah. And
oh, man.
I worked there in my late teens, and he definitely worked there. I can confirm that he was on the payroll, but he almost looked like he didn't, because not only did he wear army fatigues, but he was always outside. So, you know, at Target, you wear a red shirt, but his was always pink because it was so sun faded. And it just looked like he didn't work there because he was wearing a pink shirt and the rest of it was army getup.
I get it now. I totally see how this happened. I totally see this. And everyone works at Target, right? Because I did too.
Right? Like that's just so a rite of passage, I feel like. But yeah, it was totally the image that was conjured in my head was just this very intense guy that just treats everything like it's just a countdown to the launch, you know? Just minus 5 minutes, you know? Everything is just intense.
And especially when you are 6'2", 175 pounds, working a night shift too, you know? It's like, that's kind of not an imposing, but it's like kind of sketch, you know? And describing him as ill-tempered and sullen, you know? I mean, geez.
Yeah, all these things in combination. Like, I feel like I'm just going to say that for the entire episode. Like, any one of these things, not a big deal. But all of these things together is just like, we know this is headed to a bad place. And we just have to say that thing we say all the time. If you see something, say something. Like, He's not just the ill-tempered guy. He's also these 10 other things that are concerning. So say something to someone, you know? Let's make sure that we get him to the right person to help him. Anyway, he's intense and he's a big guy, and this is just... He's got a lot of issues that he's dealing with, and they're not treated. And so it's just not going to end well.
Yeah, that's the key, is that everything that's going on is not treated.
I hate when people draw this direct link. There's quite a few podcasts that'll just be like, oh, it's someone's mentally ill, therefore they're murdering someone. And it's just that kind of thing drives me crazy. We are never, ever going to be the podcast that says that kind of bullshit. It's just all these things need to be treated. People need help, and people need someone to intervene as well. If it's something that you can't see yourself, that you're not getting help for, these are the type of things where we're like, okay, check on your great aunt that you haven't heard from a while. Check on your cousin that likes to draw all the weapons. Make sure he's doing okay. You know, like, we need to make sure we're looking out for each other. Because it's totally okay to have mental health issues, and we need less stigma around those things. But we also need to make sure that we're looking out for each other and getting everybody the proper support and treatment. That's all it's about. All these things in conjunction with each other mean he needs help. He needs someone to step in.
Hear, hear.
it's just not going to end well, basically. So other people that worked with him recall his more extreme personality traits, saying that he was argumentative, irrational, erratic, and consistently displayed strange behavior. Even if he could get along with just a few of his coworkers, he never got along with any of the supervisors because he really clashed with authority figures and he did not like to take direction. His colleagues thought that it was strange that Joseph did martial arts throughout his shift. He would perform what was described as death chants and generally exhibited strange behavior. Instead of doing his work, he would practice his moves, kicking and punching the mailbags. A coworker recalls, quote, "He was always walking around like some karate guy, chopping his hands in the air."
I think we may have just solved the why he was only in the Navy for 2 years question.
Exactly.
And that's what I was trying
to say.
He's punching in the air.
Yes.
I mean, goodbye.
Exactly. And again, I hate to just speculate on things. I hate filling in the gaps where we don't know concrete evidence of what happened. But I think it's safe to say, like you said, problems with authority and just doing martial arts while you're supposed to be working, not going to be a good fit for the Navy. I can't assume that he took this on as a new trait. I'm assuming that he did this before. It's pretty safe to say that that was one of the factors at minimum to him being let go from the Navy.
Yeah, I think we solved that case.
In 1984, he was reprimanded by postal supervisors for harassing coworkers. Although we actually have no further details on the incident, the report is not public or anything, so we don't really know beyond the fact that there was harassment. That same year, Joseph worked with a man named Roy Edwards to invest $10,000 with his company that specialized in precious metals and coins. He received dividends from his investments for a short period of time, but eventually the checks just got smaller and smaller until they just completely stopped altogether. When Roy Edwards' company went out of business in 1985, Joseph demanded that he get his $10,000 back. Joseph called repeatedly, and he even actually showed up at the office demanding the return of his money, but he had no success. He really felt like Roy was being evasive, and he was infuriated that he would be so unethical by avoiding him. Joseph was not just angry, but also disappointed and really sad because he had this goal of buying a house. And because he lost this investment, that goal was either delayed or possibly just gone.
I mean, again, he has a long-term goal. It's interesting. Like,
he's working towards things.
Yeah. He's working towards something. He's got a job. He's living somewhere. He's paying rent. He's doing the things that, as what we're going to call a normal person, you're supposed to do, right? But because of these little, imperfections, if you will, things somewhere get a little misconstrued, and there's issues with the way we function with relationships. But in the black and white life stuff, he seems to be doing well. Apart from getting married and having kids, you buy a house, you do everything else is like right in line,
Yeah, all the things that if you're like me, you compare yourself to other people. You're like, well, I haven't hit this milestone yet, so I don't really feel like an adult. He's kind of trying to check those things off. We don't see him really having relationships and in that sense. But I mean, He is really trying to come home from the Navy, still be young. He's working towards getting a career. He's working towards a house. These are these milestones that people really want to achieve certain things to kind of transition into responsible adulthood if you want to have that kind of normalcy or whatnot.
Yeah.
If that's your goal. That was his. Not everybody wants that. It's okay that not everybody wants that. But he definitely was like, I'm following this path. The ninja spirit wants me to transition to this type of average adulthood. So he was going for it.
Yeah, definitely. It's just the little, his ability to relate to people is where we're having problems.
Exactly. And I think that if he did have that ability to relate to people, he probably would have gone for their relationship milestones, like a wife and kids and stuff like that, I think.
Or would have finished the Navy as well.
Well, yes, there is that.
Theoretically.
But instead, the things that were kind of more in his wheelhouse, he was achieving those goals.
Yeah.
So on November 15th, 1988, Joseph, dressed in a ninja-style costume with a mask and gloves, and went to Roy Edwards' home in Montville, New Jersey. He forced his way in the home, then instructed Roy and his 2 daughters to all go into the master bedroom. He had them sit on the bed, then put blindfolds on, and then he handcuffed them. Just after 8 p.m., Roy's wife, Eileen, arrived home. The door was locked, but before she could actually get her key turned to unlock it, the door suddenly just opened, and she saw a man in front of her dressed in all black, wearing a mask.
That would be very scary.
So terrifying.
To just open the door to that.
Yes, you have a family, you know that your husband and kids are there. This poor woman, I just can't imagine.
Yeah.
He told her that her family was upstairs, and if she didn't want them to get hurt, she needed to do what he said. Joseph took her upstairs, where she saw her husband along with her 9-year-old and 7-year-old daughter, all blindfolded and handcuffed. Joseph blindfolded and handcuffed her, then demanded that Roy and Eileen give him money. So they basically just started pulling everything out, both their wallets, anything they had around the house, and it amounted to $700. And they told him, this is all we have. Joseph, knowing that he was owed $10,000, was just completely enraged by this, and he just began screaming and getting violent. So he ended up raping Eileen, and then also their 2 daughters.
Straight to hell.
Unbelievable.
No go, just straight to hell.
Absolutely. It's just monstrous. All these things, like I said, we see leading up to this, and I just wish that he would have gotten some sort of help, treatment, and trauma therapy, medication, whatever it took. I just wish that would have happened, because these poor little girls and this woman, my heart breaks for them. It just didn't need to happen. All these things happening together were just one big giant red flag. During this process, Eileen's blindfold loosened and she saw Joseph pacing wearing a mask and surgical gloves. She also saw a gun that he had placed on the floor. So what she did, so clever and just being right in the moment, she discreetly kicked it under the bed so he couldn't see it.
Nice.
Yeah, it's just so smart. Just thinking on your feet. Just amazing. Joseph, he just kept screaming, walking around demanding more money and pacing. But they just didn't have any more. There was just nothing beyond that $700 they scraped together. So he raped Eileen again.
Maybe this time she'll give him the money. Man,
right.
What? There's just no logic. There's no sense to be made of anything. You can't make sense of it. You gotta just keep going. Just so upsetting.
So Roy said that he had valuable coins downstairs. He was just kind of trying to get it to stop, and trying to spare his wife and daughters. So he's like, I've got these valuables. It's not cash, but at least it's something. So it'll get him to stop for a minute, So Joseph grabbed him and led him downstairs so that they could go get these valuable coins. As he was leaving, he warned Irene and the girls that if he saw anything in the media about what happened that night, he would come back to get them. When Joseph and Roy left the room, Eileen got up and pushed this heavy dresser in front of the door to block it. This woman is this is all of us people that are true crime aficionados. We know to do these things. And this woman is clearly one of us that's just like thinking on her feet, trying to separate herself and her attacker and really making all the right moves, which is incredibly smart and incredibly lucky that she had that opportunity.
Yeah, she's paying attention. She's getting the blindfold loose. She's knocking guns around. She's moving furniture. I mean, she's doing everything the right way in this terrible situation because there is no right way because you have no idea what's going on. But, I mean, damn, yeah, she's got some wits about her.
Absolutely. It's just so hard to have composure during this kind of time, and you just go into this survival mode. And I think it's truly amazing that she thought to do these things. And I just really applaud her for that, because I know that it would be just almost impossible to really keep your wits about you and achieve those things to ensure your safety. Most people just aren't able to do that, and it's just so sad. So it's really amazing and a testament to her that she was able to do that. After they were out of the room, she then heard what sounded like a gun being loaded. Then her husband outside screaming, "He's going to kill me." Eileen attempted to open the window in the bedroom, but she wasn't able to because of her handcuffs. So again, thinking on her feet, she instead punched the window to break it. She began just screaming up a storm, trying to get anyone's attention that she could, and it just so happened that there was a neighbor out who was walking their dog, and they heard Eileen screaming, so they called the police. Joseph heard the commotion upstairs, so he ran back up, but of course, he couldn't force his way into the bedroom because she had already put that heavy dresser in front of the door to block it.
Good job.
So, of course, he had no choice to just flee the scene. When police arrived, they found Roy's body in the backyard, lying face down, with blood pooling around his neck and shoulders. When the medical examiner moved Roy's body, a bullet fell from a wound on his neck. The autopsy determined that Roy had been shot in the back of the neck, which cut his spinal cord and disconnected his brain from his body. It is believed that Roy was shot while he was already laying on the ground. A black hood was found on the floor in the den, and the gun Eileen kicked under the bed was also recovered. Detectives also found a .22 caliber bullet shell, a flashlight, a box of ammunition, 2 pistol magazines, and a syringe in a plastic wrapper. All of those things kind of make sense, but the syringe throws me off.
Yeah, 100%. Like somebody came here to do something not good, right? I mean,
yeah.
No matter what, this is showing, premeditation, planning. You're bringing everything with you, all of it. You've got something to do, and then you're bringing a syringe or something clearly to sedate or, impair someone else on top of a gun. What are we doing?
I mean, all those things are typical, robbery, assault, murder, crime scene evidence that's collected. We always find guns, ammunition, stuff like that. It's pretty normal. But when you see something like a syringe, to me, it kind of elevates it like there's something more sinister. Of course, they didn't recover whatever the drug was or whatever substance was going to be injected into someone. That was never found, but it really, I don't know, all I can think of is elevates it to this definitely more severe, more sinister, more evil crime or intention, right?
Yeah.
Since hundreds of investors had lost money while dealing with Roy Edwards, detectives had trouble narrowing down the suspect pool, and they had no leads whatsoever. Police never even looked at Joseph as a suspect or even brought him in for questioning as one of Roy's former clients. So basically, Joseph just went back to life as usual.
Okay.
He followed the case in the news, but it was like, that was it. He was like, he knew he got away with it.
This is it. This is the one. You get one time. You know? We talk about this all the time. You can get away with it once. They will not find you. This is it. You're done. Now you lead, the clean-nosed lifestyle, straight and narrow, right? And you'll get away with it. And you know it, and it's all good. But as soon as you slip, something's coming back.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, I think we could see this all the time. Like, if it just seems like a random attack, so often people can just get away with these awful, horrific things. But when you call attention to yourself or you commit another crime, then that's where they can start to piece things together. But like you said, it's like if just one incident happens, a lot of times detectives have a impossible time figuring out who the suspect is and narrowing that down and actually bringing someone to justice, And
it's always some small thread from something stupid, like, a shoplifting incident, or I sped through a light and a license plate. Oh, it was a car that matched. Just some detective suddenly sees a thread and starts pulling it and everything unravels. And it's like,
right.
You get away with it one time. That's it. And when you get away, then you move out of the county, you go to another city, like one county over, and you can live the rest of your life and be fine.
Court, it really sounds like you're trying to give people like a playbook to get away with this stuff.
It kind of does. But it's just, I love stats. I love patterns. And there's certain things you just see again and again. This is one of them.
Right. Yes.
This
is one of those patterns where it's like, a lot of people just commit that one crime and it's fine. But they're not able to stick to one. Once you get away with it, I feel like it emboldens people where they're like, well, I got away with it once. I feel like that's the thing. People are like, may as well do it again whenever they get this sort of agitation or find another enemy or whatever, Yeah. It's just impossible to keep your nose clean, as you said, when you already got away with it once. You're like, well, I could do this again.
Yeah, and if it wasn't for a lot of his mental health issues, this probably would have just closed case or open case that was just never closed and gone cold. But because of his other issues, like you said, one separate isn't an issue. But when you put it all together, it is a figure that you kind of start talking about.
Yeah, once they look into him, it's just all this stuff doesn't add up. This is kind of problematic. If they brought him in to interview him, I think they may have looked a little bit deeper. I think if they actually interviewed him at this time, he would have been elevated on the suspect list.
Yeah,
because
right.
of all these, layers of factors that he had. Like I said, not just one thing, not stigmatizing mental health, just all these one on top of the other, character witnesses, people saying about his odd behavior. It just wouldn't have been good. The detectives would have put it together pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But as it was, they just were like, he's got all these clients that are mad at him, so we don't know who it could be. And it was just a cold case. Although Joseph was able to avoid trouble with the law and evade suspicion about his involvement in Roy's murder, he was starting to have more trouble at work. In February of 1990, Joseph's supervisor, Carol Ott, filed a report with the Ridgewood Police Department accusing Joseph of harassment. Chief Frank C. Milliken did not specify the type of harassment, but he did say that it was not sexual harassment. So yeah, we don't know much, but I'm not going to speculate. Let's move on.
No, I'm sure it was, a series of conversations that piqued her interest. Like, that's all you gotta say.
Yeah, made her uncomfortable.
Yes.
Or, because he was just such an intense person, maybe he's hinted at violence, or because of his problem with authority.
Yeah.
Maybe he was just really insubordinate to the point of being very agitated with her and it made her uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think Carol caught on. I think Carol
Yeah.
noticed something's up, and honestly, this is just, when you're, working a place, this is semantics. You have to complain about a person, it's going to be a harassment claim, right?
Right.
So, to me, it's she caught on, she saw some questionable behavior and reported it, and it's just kind of called harassment. Who knows what it was, but this is the first tipping.
Especially as the supervisor, you've got to assume that she's going to be the person that he has a particular problem with.
Definitely.
Of all people. After speaking with police, Carol actually decided not to file a formal criminal complaint against Joseph because she said that she thought she should actually consult a lawyer first.
Wow.
She told the police that she would return after seeking legal counsel, but then she just never came back. Some coworkers said that they could not recall any real incidents in particular between Carol and Joseph, but many others said that they just knew that the two of them did not get along. No big blow up, no big incident, just the fact that they were constantly at odds with each other. One former mail sorter said, quote, "They were like oil and water. They just didn't mix. He just had something against her." A few coworkers recalled that Joseph said he was going to, quote, "get Carol." A mail delivery person named Philip Torchio said, quote, "I asked her a couple of months ago if she was having any problems with him, and she just smiled and said no."
Well, yeah, she filed a complaint, and therefore, they're going to talk to him. He's going to see the error of his ways, that he was being a weirdo or something, and everything will be fine, right? That's how this works. Oh, that's not how this works? Oh, sorry. I thought when you complained at work about stuff,
that things happen and they get fixed.
I was under the impression.
No, that's usually not what happens. There are so many laws to protect people in the workplace, but usually they don't really work.
At all. So,
yeah.
Poor Carol.
Only a couple months after Carol first went to the police station complaining of harassment, she decided to start the process of getting rid of Joseph for good. Considering his various behavior that was concerning to his coworkers and the fact that he was often engaged in other activities instead of doing his work, she definitely had cause to pursue disciplinary action against him. Carol requested that Joseph complete a, quote, fitness for duty exam, which is a procedure in the Postal Service requiring that a doctor assess an employee. So this includes both a physical and psychological evaluation to determine if the individual is able to perform the duties of their job. Joseph flat out refused to submit to the fitness for duty evaluation, and he was therefore dismissed from his job. Thomas F. Johnson, the chief inspector for the Postal Service in New Jersey, said, quote, "When he declined to go for the fitness for duty, he was removed and there was no further contact with him." Joseph was completely enraged by his dismissal, and he lashed out by threatening retaliation, which his coworkers actually took seriously because, of course, many of them feared that he was really capable of making good on those threats.
See, now this is what's fucked up, is that Carol's the one that's gonna, like, quote unquote, take the bullet here, right? Because she made the complaint. But all along, these coworkers have known, and they've been scared of him, and now they're all afraid that they're gonna be retaliated against. And it's like, why weren't you filling out paperwork too? You know?
Yeah, it's really, the whole thing is so sad and tragic. And it's just, if someone would have spoken up in addition to Carol, if they would have spoken up earlier, if they would have, I don't know, there's just so many ways that people could have stepped in when all this behavior and concerning stuff happened. And I'm not just thinking of in the workplace, but, you know, just people that knew him or his family or whatever, you know, I mean, he obviously was having trouble functioning at work, and I don't know. I mean, just for Carol to be the focus of this and to take the heat for it, it wasn't her fault. There was so many other people that were seeing this happen in front of them and didn't do anything.
Yep.
But, and also, it's not their fault, you know? I mean,
No.
I wish that they would have said something, but I'm not blaming them because obviously nobody deserves to be retaliated against and to have someone threaten them and all these things. It's scary. But at the same time, I just wish that there had been more reports earlier on that something could have been done, some sort of intervening on him. A union rep later said that they had offered him assistance in fighting to keep his job, but Joseph actually declined the help. And I don't know if it's just that he felt so resigned to the fact that, like, oh, they're just going to get rid of me no matter what or whatever, or if he was just so dedicated to, like, being the victim in this situation. You know, I mean, I think there's people that are real victims out there, and I don't think he was the victim. Like, this was a normal procedure that he wasn't doing his job. There was reason to discipline him, and he's just kind of sitting back playing the victim about it, I think.
And honestly, all he had to do was show up to an evaluation.
Yep, that's it.
Like, just show up to an office, they ask you some questions, and honestly, like, you can get through you can talk your way through that stuff.
Right.
And it sounds like he did a good job all along, you know? So he could have passed it. I mean, they're letting anybody do this stuff. You know what I mean? He probably could have even passed the evaluation and everything would have been cool. He just would have been pissed at Carol. Sure, we got that.
Right.
But, I mean, he doesn't even want to try. So, you know, God helps those who helps themselves.
Yeah, he definitely didn't want to put any effort into it. It just was like, no, fuck them. You know, they want me to get evaluated. That's it. I'm out. But at the same time, you know, even if he didn't pass, all they would do most likely is just have him, like, send him to anger management.
Or put him at a different branch.
Something.
Yep.
So it really wouldn't have been that big of a deal. They weren't saying, hey, you're fired or we're writing you up. They were saying, hey, we want to make sure you're okay. Do this evaluation. It doesn't feel good to hear that news, I'm sure. But it's not the same thing as you're fired. He chose to leave the premises and say, fuck everyone, say he was going to retaliate and just not come back when he was asked to do this exam. That was his choice. And then he denied help and played the victim.
Yeah, pretty much.
A postal workers union official named Thomas Duane said that Joseph, quote, said he would take care of things in his own way. For the next year and a half, Joseph was unemployed and spent much of his time isolating in his bedroom.
Not good.
All of these things are leading to just all bad. Again, this is an opportunity for someone to intervene, like a family member or something, you know? And I know he's not talking to them, but maybe his half-sister could reach out to his mom and be like, I think he needs a pep talk, you know? Something.
Well, remember, he's very, very quiet.
Yeah. Joseph was still holding on to resentment and anger towards his former employer, and he began to stockpile automatic weapons, grenades, and ninja swords while in isolation. In early October 1991, Joseph wrote a letter detailing his complaints about working for the postal office, how he felt he was treated unfairly, and the injustices he felt that he had experienced. He wrote that he wanted to get revenge and vowed that his colleagues would pay. In the letter, he referred to Pat Sherrill's 1986 post office mass murder of 14 people and said that he planned to carry out a similar attack.
It's insane that the whole time he's in isolation, he's just planning.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
He's just making plans.
It's obsession. You have all this free time, so you can just obsess about getting revenge.
Yeah.
On the evening of October 9th, 1991, Joseph woke up shortly before midnight and got dressed in his black military fatigues, combat boots, bulletproof vest, and a ninja-style mask. He packed up an arsenal of weapons, including an Uzi, a .22 caliber machine gun with silencer, several knives, hand grenades, a homemade pipe bomb, a samurai sword, and some homemade ether bombs. In the very early hours of October 10th, 1991, Joseph rigged his front door with a homemade bomb with explosives and an ether-based can of auto-starting fluid.
It's pretty messed up because your sister owns this house that is 6 bedrooms that you rent one, so there's obviously more people there.
Yes!
Like, if it's just your house, just your apartment, by yourself, okay, take yourself out. Cool. You know, obviously not the bomb squad people, I'm sorry. But you know what I mean? Like, there's other people in this house.
Yes. And family.
Yes, there it is. Thank you for explaining what I'm trying to say.
6 bedrooms. It's your sister's place. Maybe nieces and nephews are there. We don't know if there's other tenants there. But if you've got a 6-bedroom house, you've got a lot of people. So
yes.
He just, this guy is just, he's monstrous. I mean, he just does not care.
You're like ensuring that some other person that isn't you is going to be injured.
Absolutely.
Someone you know in that house you lived in for 14 years. That to me is almost like a little more pathologically crazy.
Yeah, I mean, someone
Anyway.
that you've known for so long that's part of your family, like you said, 14 years, you just don't care. You're willing to just murder them with a bomb.
Yeah.
It's very, very disturbing. He then left home and headed to his former supervisor, Carol Ott's home. When he arrived, he snuck into the home and found Carol's fiancé, Cornelius Caston Jr., in the basement rec room watching TV. He crept up behind him and shot him, execution style, in the back of the head. Joseph then headed upstairs where he found Carol Ott in the bedroom wearing only a t-shirt. He pulled out his samurai sword and began swinging it at her, initially leaving a deep wound coming down from her left shoulder. Carol stumbled backward and tried to block or catch the sword, creating defensive wounds on her arms and her hands. But ultimately, Joseph just kept swinging and thrusting the sword until she died of her injuries. Before he left, Joseph decided to ensure that she was dead by thrusting the sword into her back 3 times. There were no signs of sexual assault. Joseph then left Carol's home and headed to the Ridgewood post office just before 2 a.m. When he arrived, he entered through the back door of the post office, where he shot and killed 2 mail handlers, 59-year-old Joseph Vanderpauw and 63-year-old Donald McNaught. At 2:15 a.m., a male truck driver named Marcelo Collado pulled up to the rear loading dock of the post office with a truck full of mail. On most nights, the bay doors would be open in anticipation of his arrival, but on this night, Marcelo saw that the bay doors were closed and the lights were all off. Marcelo just immediately knew that something was wrong because normally the overnight workers would come to the back bay door to help him and everything would be open and ready to go so he could unload the truck as soon as he pulled up.
Yeah, they're on a time constraint. So, like, you be there, open the door, get the mail out. We got to go.
Right. I mean, I'm sure he's going to multiple locations to deliver to these local post offices. So, yeah, right on schedule. 2 a.m., you know what to do. Get it done quickly, and I'm out to the next post office. So when he saw this, even though it was weird, he was just like, okay, something must be going on. He just decided to park it like normal, get out, and walk towards the basement of the post office to just see what was going on. Marcelo was shocked when he was walking in and came face to face with a man wearing a gas mask, wielding a gun. Joseph fired a shot at Marcelo, but missed. So Marcelo sprinted out the back of the building, got in his truck, and drove to the police station a half-mile away. At about 2:20 a.m., Sergeant Robert Kay and Officer Peter Tuchel went to the post office where they also encountered the gunman. Joseph began throwing explosives at them, so they decided to retreat and wait for backup.
Wow. He's like, just throwing them. It's like a whole scene, you know? It's in your head. It's a movie.
It's not just guns, which are scary enough. I mean, he's throwing explosives. I mean, he's just out for maximum damage, and it's terrifying.
Yeah.
Within minutes, the building was surrounded by police officers. By this point, more employees were showing up for work, but police, of course, had to stop people from approaching the building. From about 3:15 a.m. until just after 6 a.m., officers were attempting to get a hold of Joseph by calling the phone inside the post office. But even though they were calling just over and over again for hours, Joseph never answered. Just before 6:30 a.m., the SWAT team entered through the side door and attempted to negotiate with Joseph. So after a 4-hour total standoff and half an hour of SWAT team negotiations, he surrendered, and the SWAT team emerged with Joseph apprehended at around 6:50 a.m.
No one expected that.
Not at all. I was like, oh, he's going to blow up the whole building. I mean,
something.
You just think, I mean, this is all bad enough, but you think it's going to get worse. I can't believe that they apprehended him without even more deaths.
Yeah.
He was wearing a gas mask and bulletproof vest and armed with a 9mm handgun, a .22 caliber gun with silencer, a samurai sword, 3 hand grenades, and some homemade bombs. Joseph was arrested and taken into custody. Police really assumed that he was prepared to die that morning and that he planned to either kill himself or basically commit suicide by cop, but instead he changed his mind at the last second. Detectives had gone to Joseph's apartment at about 3 a.m., but Joseph's cousin Carmen, who was his landlord, refused to let them in without a warrant. Again, another hero from this story, because typically you would just be like, okay, anything that we can get, any information on this guy would be helpful. In a lot of cases, you want to have immediate access to whatever's going on in their dwelling. But on this occasion, we know that there's bombs. Her saying, no, not without a warrant, is saving lives, you know? At the
Yeah.
time that this happened, where they first show up at the house, police didn't know that Joseph had several homemade explosives in his possession. So they really wouldn't think to take certain precautions or send in bomb experts to his house. The fact that Carmen delayed the police by asking for a warrant just ended up saving lives, since, of course, they'd realized during his capture that they actually needed to be wary of explosive devices. His cousin Carmen Johnson said, quote, "If I did what the police asked me to do and I gave them the key, we would all be dead now."
Okay. Thank you, Carmen, but don't act like you planned this.
Right.
Okay.
Giving herself
acting
credit
like-
after the fact.
Come on. Yeah, exactly. Oh, it is because of me, you see. Like, stop it.
When Carol didn't show up to work, police decided that they should do a welfare check. The problem was that because Joseph was clearly partial to using explosives, they feared that her home and his apartment could both be rigged with bombs. During questioning, Joseph admitted that he had in fact booby-trapped his own apartment, so police were aware of what they were walking into. Both his and Carol's homes were cordoned off and carefully examined before police proceeded to begin their searches. Carol's home was clear, but as police described at Joseph's home, quote, "There was an accelerant with gunpowder. It was wired with fishing line to the door. If you opened up the door, it would go off." Once they were inside the apartment, detectives recovered many weapons along with pictures of Joseph dressed in ninja attire and holding weapons. They also recovered 2 handwritten letters in which Joseph called himself a, quote, warrior who was likely to die, quote, in combat with great honor.
I wonder if that's how he saw this whole thing. It was like us or like me versus them. And at some point, the post office and his coworkers became the enemy. And so when, who knows, right? We can't put logic on this. But so it was looked at as like a battlefield, like a war. So the bombs, the multiple guns, the samurai swords, the extreme violence. It's war. It's wartime.
Absolutely. I think he definitely created this scenario in his mind where he was wronged, the injustice was done to him, and it was the right thing to do to seek out revenge and to avenge the wrong that was done to him. I think he did create that split of he was the victim, he was, had the bad luck, and they were all the fortunate people and the people that took advantage of him. So it was the right thing to act on that and hold them accountable, basically. That's in his brain, I think, what was going on. One of the letters that he wrote talked about his anger at Roy Edwards, which suddenly made detectives realize that they should look for evidence to connect him to Roy Edwards' murder that was still unsolved at this point.
They didn't even know they were going to be closing up cases.
Nope, not at all.
No clue.
During the search of his home, they found handcuffs and a flashlight just like the ones found at the Edwards home after the murder. They also found the same type of syringe that was recovered at the Edwards crime scene. Joseph had also kept 2 newspaper clippings that were about the attack on the Edwards family.
But I thought if you saw it in the media, you were going to go back and kill him.
Right?
Whatever.
Yeah, just
Anyway.
talking shit. He's just talking out of his ass.
Yeah.
Joseph was charged with murder, attempted murder, kidnapping, possession of automatic weapons and explosives, and his bail was set at $1 million. As the charges were read by Judge Charles R. DeGisi, Joseph shook his head and smiled. He screamed out, quote, "It's wrong, I didn't shoot," so the judge ordered him to be silent. After the murders, the Ridgewood post office flag flew at half-mast and posted a large sign thanking the community for their concern, while also requesting that they not question the postal workers about the killings. And you know, if they had to put that sign up, there was just so many people coming to the post office asking, did you know him? What happened? Were you here? And that's so awful and traumatic for people to relive, you know?
Yeah.
I just can't believe that people were that insensitive to poke and prod at these people that just went through such an extreme tragedy.
Yeah.
It's just awful. After the attack, many coworkers looked back at Joseph's behavior in a new light. A postal supervisor named Anthony LaPrinza described Joseph as quiet and strange and said, quote, "You knew something like this was going to happen." Which just again begs the question, why not intervene or speak up earlier?
Yeah.
In April 1993, while they were in the midst of jury selection, the prosecutor offered a plea agreement which would allow Joseph to avoid the death penalty in exchange for a life sentence. Joseph agreed to the terms, and both sides began preparing to proceed with the plea agreement. But moments before they were all preparing to sign the documents, Joseph had an outburst and suddenly tore up all the paperwork.
He's his own worst enemy.
He really is. Just at every turn, he's doing whatever's the worst for him.
Yep.
And other people around him, of course, not making light of that. With the plea off the table, the state proceeded with the trial as a capital case. Joseph's lawyers attempted to prove he was insane and claimed that he did not know that what he was doing was wrong. The defense brought in a psychiatrist to testify that Joseph heard voices, had delusions, believed in his own reality, and was a paranoid schizophrenic. The doctor believed Joseph was legally insane at the time of the murders and did not know that what he was doing was actually wrong, so he couldn't be criminally responsible. During the psychiatrist's examination, Joseph said that he was guided by what he called, again, a ninja spirit. The state psychiatrist confirmed that Joseph did indeed have auditory delusions, but he said that his diagnosis was schizoid personality disorder, and he was not legally insane.
That tends to, it makes a little more sense, the paranoid schizophrenia versus schizoid. The fact that he's able to have such a normal life on one hand. Right? And then also just have these, as I said earlier, imperfections. And it makes more sense with schizoid.
Yeah.
So that to me actually makes much more sense. And it's hard to tell. I am not a doctor, but just it tracks better.
Right.
He knew what he was doing, that it was wrong.
He did, absolutely. He knew, he had premeditated. There was just a lot of thought that went into this. He knew that he was avenging the wrongs that happened to him, and he knew that that wasn't okay to do, to murder people, but he did it anyway. He wasn't that detached from reality to just not know that this was not okay to take someone's life.
Yes.
In cross-examination, the state psychiatrist did admit that if his schizoid personality disorder were severe, Joseph would have difficulty at work and be described by his coworkers as exhibiting concerning behavior. In 1992, Joseph was found guilty of both the attack on the Edwards family and the slaying of the Ridgewood post office employees. Joseph was convicted of burglary, robbery, kidnapping, sexual assaults, and murder, then sentenced to death. While in prison, Joseph was part of a lawsuit refuting the constitutionality of the state's death penalty, but he would never make it to his hearing in front of the New Jersey Supreme Court. In September of 1996, only 2 days before his scheduled hearing, he died of natural causes.
Well, he caused his own death. Naturally. Right? Like, I mean, what? 2 days before?
Yeah. The
that
timing
doesn't
of that is really incredible. Unbelievable, in fact.
Oh my God. Okay.
So that's the story of Joseph M. Harris.
As soon as this guy wears the beret to work, the day that happens is the day that I get the paperwork, you know? And then when it's full fatigues and a beret, we're making phone calls.
Bad combo. Just bad combo.
We're calling corporate aware lines. We're doing it all, you know?
I don't know if just the outfit would make me immediately call authorities or get someone involved, but I would definitely be like, hey, dude, so like, how was your childhood? You want to talk about your parents, maybe? Just kind of dig a little bit and then see what's there, you know?
See, this is where people see the yin to our yang, right? You're like, let me have a talk with this guy. And I'm just like, hey, motherfucker, what's up with your beret?
Beret equals murderer.
Well, I just...
in Courtney's brain.
It's a look. Like, no, I'm all about...
it is a look.
Le chapeau. Are you kidding? It's fine. But...
murderer, but make it fashion.
But the whole... exactly. But the whole thing, when you put it all in perspective, the whole thing, each thing on its own is not scary. As a total, it is scary.
Yes, absolutely. It's just all these things. And I feel like, man, sometimes I feel like I'm very repetitive, you know?
Yes.
But it's like, it is just so easy to just combine all these things and have it escalate, you know?
Yes.
It's, if you could take that one thing, break it down and treat it, it's not a big deal. If you can take this trauma and work on a therapist and get some help, if you've got this schizoid or schizophrenia, you can work with a psychiatrist and therapist and get that treatment. All these things, you know, if you are having trouble being social, there's ways to kind of just confront that and work at being better around people. You know, all these things. We call them, like in my household, we call them projects. Like, you know, my anxiety is a project I have, you know, like I have to work on it and try and be more calm and confront certain things and just kind of deal with it. That's my project, you know, and everybody has these things in one way or another. And these people that commit crimes, these murderers that we talk about, often have so many of these projects, but it's not impossible to really address them. I mean, I can't imagine being in his position where he was born in a jail and he's got all these siblings and this instability in his home life. But that said, there's plenty of people that come from a background that's similar or the same or challenged or whatever that turn into amazing, productive, wonderful, healthy, emotionally well people. It just takes a little bit of work to get there, you know?
Yeah,
and
100%.
He just didn't have the type of resources or people to step in or do the work or all that stuff. But everything combined is just, it was a dangerous combo, especially untreated.
You know what else? There's actually a lot here also that, you know, he was... Okay, let's be real. Like he was falling apart in some ways. He's losing his job, but he was able to at least show up for work. You know, like we were saying, like the black and white stuff. You know, he's got that.
The on-paper goal achievements.
You got it. So then he loses his job because he doesn't want to do the evaluation. And what this really speaks to is what isolation can also do to your mind. And you know, we know a lot of people who are quarantined and isolated right now. And, you know, people tell you, oh my God, I feel like I'm losing my mind, this and that. And those are people that don't have pre-existing, you know, born in a prison to a month, right? All these issues to begin with.
Family issues and mental health and
all of
even people that are very well and healthy are struggling in isolation.
Yes. And then you throw in, 6 months of solid isolation plus the obsession with violence and weapons and the training behind it in the Navy and just all these different little projects he had going on.
And the fact that he got away with murder once before.
It
emboldens him.
100%. And I really think that it would have happened eventually, but that isolation sped that up.
You're right, but I would also add betrayal. It's just the anger from being betrayed plus just being at home, unemployed, by himself, quiet, not really having any human contact. I mean, just like you said, that was it.
Just festering, sitting at home, thinking about how he's been wronged, the injustice of it all. It all stems back to this bitch Carol. And realistically, it's, turn the mirror on yourself. But he can't. He's like mentally incapable. So therefore, it's the injustice, it's the anger, it's the revenge.
Yeah, definitely the anger he has and the untreated issues that he struggles with his mental health made him not be able to look at his own part in it, to not be able to look at what was still in his power to fix, Because, I mean, if this same scenario happened to someone who was healthy, or if I put myself in his shoes or whatnot, I would either submit to the evaluation or take action against the post office using that union rep. He had recourse. He had things that he could do, but he refused, And then there's things that you could fix within yourself. Like once you're unemployed, look at yourself and think, okay, what can I do at my job next time so this doesn't happen again? But he wasn't able to do that just because of the things he struggled with and the fact that they were untreated, undiagnosed, and just sitting there, like you said, festering. He wasn't capable of seeing his own part in it. He just went deeper and deeper into the obsession of what other people had done wrong and how he was the victim and how he needed to get back at them.
Yep.
In essence, I think that kind of sums up most of the postal attacks. I feel like people are choosing to, when someone goes postal, it seems like a recurring theme that something happens, just a hiccup, a disciplinary action, a firing, whatever it is, or just overwhelmed with the stress of work, an extra workload, just a list, a myriad of things that could happen at any workplace. And the postal workers, you see time and time again, just completely are unable to see it as anything but betrayal and I've got to get back at my employer and my coworkers.
Yeah, and the other angle of that too is that most of them have a pre-existing family history of something like a schizoid, schizophrenia, bipolar mania disorder that is completely untreated. That's another angle of this, is that it's people that would probably have a problem anyway, but then put in this high stress situation, they don't know how to cope. There's no self-soothing.
And, when this term comes into prominence in the 80s or whatnot, the conversation around mental health is just next to nothing or nothing at all.
So, of course, it seems like people are just snapping.
Right. But it's like there's all these mental health issues that are so treatable and so able to be worked on that people can have these resources and they can talk about them. They can, whatever it is, group therapy, psychiatry. It couldn't have been a worse time for these types of things to happen. These people that are struggling with being overstressed or feeling like they're victimized or whatever could have gotten the opportunity today to really have more dialogue about their mental health, get a therapist, get on medication, whatever it is. But back then, when this term was invented, I mean, it was just like, oh, let's call it going postal. Let's not talk about the fact that they have these mental health challenges that could be actually addressed.
Yeah.
Anyway.
This is gonna be kind of an interesting one because they're all so different and so similar.
Yeah, there's a lot of through lines where, you could just pull that thread and you're like, oh, it's the same thread from the last one.
Same thread as this one or this one or this
right.
one. It was just very eye-opening.
Yeah. So that's our very first letter P episode for Going Postal.
Yeah. And at this point, I will go ahead and insert an ad for our Patreon episode on David Lynn Scott III, also known as the Ninja Killer.
When I was going through this episode, I was like, wait a minute. This is just like David Lynn Scott.
Just like it. So many ways.
Yeah.
The trauma childhood. I mean, the traumatic childhood on another level of trauma. Going right into ninjas. And the ninja spirit guides me. All of it.
Yeah.
I was there. I was in it.
So many similarities. Yeah, absolutely. That's a great Patreon episode to check out. And speaking of which, before we get out of here, if you want to get on our Patreon and get bonus episodes, ad-free episodes, and perks, then definitely join patreon.com/Murder Dictionary Podcast. That's linked in our show notes. And before we get out of here, we want to thank those new people that are on our Patreon: Casey, Charlie, Amy, and Eek Ivy, who increased their pledge. So thanks, you guys.
Thank you. We appreciate you so much.
So before we get out of here, if you want to get some updates on our new episodes, Patreon episodes, memes, whatever true crime stuff is coming out on TV or breaking news, definitely check out our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We are Murder Dictionary Podcast pretty much everywhere. If you want to read more about Going Postal and about tonight's case, then check out the links in our show notes. There's also links for mental health resources, domestic violence resources, LGBTQ stuff. There's just a lot of links in there if there's some resources that you need for yourself or someone you love. And if you want t-shirts, phone cases, mugs, all that stuff, then head over to our thread list, which is linked in the show notes. And I think that's pretty much it. You got anything else to add? I know we've been watching a lot of true crime TV.
Yeah, well, on Netflix, we've got Chris Watts and the Shanann Watts, his wife whom he murdered, in Colorado. That came out on Monday, I believe, or last week.
It was really, really good. And it was
you did watch
heavily focused on Shanann, which I appreciate. Instead of
too.
being only about Chris, which I feel like so much of the coverage was just about Chris, it really showed so much about who Shanann was as a person and in her own words, and a lot of just things that you haven't seen in the coverage of the story. So I highly recommend it.
You know, I'm really going to be looking forward to the inevitable, 6-part doc in a couple of years when they really break that case. You know how it is now with all the Netflix and the 6 parts, right?
Right.
So I want to know more about the mistress. They were only together for 2 months, girl.
Yeah, so short.
What the hell went down? So yeah, there's a lot of questions there. We have to do a Patreon on this or something, because I have a lot of feelings.
Yes, I have to be honest. So when I saw the footage of the mistress being interviewed or interviewed, let's say, police interviewed, there's something about her that's very performative. And I know we talk about secondary victims, and I believe that she was lied to. I believe that she was taken advantage of, and she is one of those kind of peripheral victims because she didn't know what was going on. But her interview just seems so rehearsed and like she was acting, and it was really bothersome to me. It was kind of disturbing. And I believe her, and I feel bad for her. So much of me feels that, but there's just this little voice in the back of my head that's just like, something's up with this. There's more to this, you know?
Something in the milk ain't clean.
Yeah.
And you know what? It's, at first you want to look at her like an Amber Fry. 100%. But there's something there. I know what you mean. It's intangible, but there's something there. So that's why I'm really looking forward to the HBO or the Netflix special in the next few years. They'll let us know.
Right. Yeah. There's definitely something.
Right. The only other thing I could think of was on Monday on ID, there was a 2-hour, it's called OJ and Nicole, an American Tragedy, I think. And it's mostly Nicole's diaries and Nicole's letters and all the evidence she had gathered against him before, the 89 beating, all the different, the police came and, found her in the yard crying but they didn't do anything. All these different, the 911 tapes. If you're triggered with, domestic violence and things, not the one for you. But if you are very deep into OJ, some good interviews we haven't seen.
And interviews or information from her perspective, which is really important because we don't really see that a lot. So no. I haven't seen it yet, but I mean, that's the thing that makes it, to me, unique and important, is that it really portrays this picture of what she was going through and tells it from her perspective and her voice, as opposed to just reliving the same old details of the crime from did he do it or didn't he do it? It's really looking at her and her struggle and what she was going through that I am eager to check out.
Yeah, it's good. I think you'll like it.
Yeah. That's Court's recommendation corner.
Right now. Yeah. There's a few more. I gotta write it all down.
You gotta rein it in because there's so much true crime content out there now that everybody's trying to jump on it and capitalize. So yeah, you can't even keep up. But
no, not at all.
I was going to end it, but now I'm thinking I've been watching The Vow and it's pretty good.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah, okay. That's going to be an episode on its own, right?
Yeah, we got to talk about that.
Something. Because this whole thing is just, there's so many angles to go out on this one.
It's so fascinating, and the perspective from the people that survived it, and it's just, I am really wrapped up in it. It's, of course, if you're a true crime person, anything involving cults is just like, to me, one of the things that I find most fascinating. I'm just drawn to it and I got to know everything. And so to hear the perspective of the people that went through it, and man, it's just so sad and so unbelievable that these people were just moving forward and following this person and just didn't see it coming. You know what I mean? It's always interesting to hear that perspective of someone that was in it and didn't know they were in it,
Yes. And also, the angle of self-help groups can really lead to some crazy shit.
Oh, yeah.
And, just the money talks also. It's crazy how a lot of things just come back to like money and sex and power, always.
Which makes me want to bring up the fact that at some point they need to do a documentary on whatever the fuck Jared Leto is doing.
Oh my God. What is going on? Jordan Catalano cannot be the way, the truth, and the light. I just don't believe that.
I mean, he's just painting himself as the Jesus, it seems.
Is it a Path to Salvation cult?
I don't exactly know, but maybe we should do the doc.
I think we should. That's a great idea. Let's do it. I'm into it.
So yeah, okay. Let's get going and start working on that. That's what we're going to do with the rest of our night.
The rest of my summer vacation.
Right.
Okay, sounds good.
While we're working on that, we hope that you guys have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next episode for the next letter P for Going Postal, and we hope you have a great week. See you next time.
See ya.
Bye.